What's up, YouTube? It has been far too long since I made some content, uh, and I've been wanting to get to a number of topics, but in my life, my number one priority has always been providing for my family and then spending time with my wife and my sons, whatever you want to say. But that's been my focus. So making content, hell, even looking at content, it goes on the back burner. It's just not a priority of mine because, what I have to do, that takes precedent. You feel me? As y'all can probably tell, I'm under the weather, probably fighting off around the pneumonia, to be honest, or like contact with the flu. I'm not really sure. Weird thing is, this happened a couple years ago. I don't usually get sick. I'm a pretty healthy person. But I'm going to get through this. It was a lot. My voice was way worse yesterday. I almost lost my voice completely. Sound like a totally different person. But I was watching one of my favorite YouTubers, Ty Boogie podcast. Shout out to Ty Boogie, my man, Ty Boogie. Give Ty Boogie a follow. That's a good dude. Married, black man like me, parent like me, smart dude like me. Definitely go follow his page. There's some valuable content on there. I'm not really with that whole series, Outwitting the Devil, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have serious value. I'm certain that it does, and I actually find live reads to be a good way to get your audience involved. Intellectually, those who are on the intellectual, like to get their intellectual ahead. They like to learn. You feel me? So let's talk briefly about why I made this video, because I don't really have a lot of time. But I figure I'm on my way to go handle some business. Let me get this video in while I'm going there. I want to talk about a couple things because Ty Boogie was talking about something that happened to Mario, the entertainer singer Mario. The dude sang "Let Me Love You" and "Just a Friend," right? We know him for them songs, right? Big in the early 2000s, back when I was about to graduate, right? So Mario, apparently he was entertaining on stage. I seen some female reach up, grab him, try to grab, looked like his private part. She groped at him, and he handled it with class. Apparently, that situation, it didn't really make the news all like that. And watching the recap on another channel, that YouTube host made a good point, which was saying like men. When men get assaulted, men are expected to just take it. Otherwise, they get called names and demonized and shamed and things like that, right? And it reminded me of my own incident back in 2009. It's not the only time in my life I've faced unwanted advances, but yes, I have been on the job before. And the most notorious case for me was 2009, when I was working for a company. I ain't gonna say the company because I successfully sued them, right? For wrongful termination. And what I probably should have did was sue them for sexual harassment. Would have made a lot bigger bag, right? But I sued them for wrongful termination, and that story is wild because there was a female manager there. She was a supervisor technically. Maybe she was a department manager. No, she was the trainer. She was the trainer for the new hires. And I wasn't feeling her, and I had a girlfriend at the time, so I was just trying to do the right thing. And I talked about this once on my Instagram page before. But the funny thing is, I shut the manager down a few times and let her know I wasn't interested. I tried to be cool about it. But the manager, one time she it's been so long, y'all. It's been almost 20 years. I'm not gonna remember it word for word, but she had said something in an email to me, and that's really what was my saving grace for the lawsuit. She said something in an email to me, and I had told her, nah, I'm cool, I'm not interested, I'm not into that. And she more or less had written back, oh, I'm not gonna try anymore, I'm done. Very emotional, very childish, very reckless thing to put in writing. or to do, period. But I guess she thought that she was untouchable because she was the trainer. The company needed her, and there's no way she was going to face consequences. But what happened next is what's really going to spin your head. Because what happened next was she didn't really talk to me for the next couple of weeks, and I felt like there was this quiet storm brewing. You feel me? Like I felt like, you was all on me. No offense to my wife, but you was all on me. And this was before I met my wife, but still I'm married now, so I want to show respect to my wife. I'll talk about things, She was all on me back when, she thought she had a shot or whatever. But after I rejected her, then she gave me the cold shoulder. And something just smelled unusual. I was like, I don't know about this, yo. I was, check it out, right? I was reading a book series at the time. I had just finished the 48 Laws of Power. While I was working there. I was working there for 9 months. 48 Laws of Power changed my life. Somebody recommended it to me. I read it, it changed my life. If you have not read the 48 Laws of Power yet, you are behind the ball. And you are hurting yourself. You need to go pick that book up. It is an extremely valuable read. I highly recommend Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. I also read The Art of Seduction. It was I didn't really like it that much. I didn't get a lot of value out of it. Personally, I didn't feel as though I did. But the 33 Strategies of War, that was like the it was like the companion book, the opposite side of the coin for the 48 Laws of Power. And not that it's opposite in any way from the 40, it's like a more extreme version of the 48 Laws of Power. It's an excellent read. And I still remember working there, and one of the supervisors, she had said to me, "Oh, I see you reading the 33 Strategies of War. Who are you at war with?" And it's funny because at the time I wasn't at war with nobody, right? But, I ended up, it was quiet for a couple weeks, and then one day, Human Resources called me into the office. And they said, "Hey, come here, we need to talk to you," right? And I remember I had brought what had happened to the attention of one of my supervisors. His name was Neil. Neil was a shifty, skinny, snaky motherfucker. I ain't gonna talk about his appearance. There's no need for that. But Neil was a snake. He was a coward. And, I was just trying to walk the straight and narrow. You know what I'm saying? I could have went around slanging, but what was the point of all that? You feel me? I have more control when when I say no. And like drugs, you can just say no. You ain't got to say yes to anybody and everybody. And that's a bar in life. You got to learn self-control. And when you respect yourself, it forces people to approach you differently. When you respect yourself to say, "I'm cool on that," or "I have standards," or "I have choices," or "I have, I'm not really interested today," people won't come at you as sideways as they used to. As you can see, she fell back, right? She fell back because she realized I wasn't somebody she could just push up on and not fall over, or, the pants would drop, or drop my drawers and just give you what you want. So, yeah, Human Resources called me into the office, and this was like a week and a half, 2 weeks after I had let Neil, one of my other supervisors, know what was good with the trainer pushing up on me. And Neil really didn't seem interested. He seemed kind of disinterested. I guess maybe he was like, "Oh, she throwing the cakes at you. Like, why you ain't trying to go into take the cakes or whatever, But I wasn't interested, I wasn't. Like I said, I was just trying to do the right thing for once in my life. I'm not gonna go into my background, but listen, Peter Parker, the fictional Peter Parker, and I, we got something in common. You understand? Innocent people have died because of the bad choices that I made. And after I experienced that, I decided that I would never, here I am telling y'all the backstory, I decided I'd never be reckless like that again. And I would make better choices. And that was one of the reasons, you know what I'm saying? Like I just decided to walk the straight and narrow. And I was trying to do right by my girlfriend at the time, So, yeah, Human resources called me to the office, and Neil was there. Was the trainer there? I don't remember if the trainer was there. I don't think she was there. But it was like 4 people in there. The human resources, which was 2 of them, the trainer, human resources, Neil, and myself. So it was 4 of us. We was in the office. And I'm listening to them. They're laying the charges out against me. They're like, yeah, we got all these complaints from your team, your female team members, saying that you've been hitting on them and trying to make advances towards them. And this literally caught me off guard. It caught me out of left field. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, this never happened, by the way. I never did nothing like this. I literally was going to work, reading the book, getting awards for customer service performance back when that was a thing. You know what I'm saying? And I've been there 9 months. I'm like, oh, I don't understand. What the hell's going on? Why y'all doing me like this? And that's when it hit me. You know, this female supervisor then went and rounded up the because I worked on a majority female team. I think there was maybe 1 gay dude. You know, customer service jobs, hell, call center roles, a lot of times be mostly staffed by females. There's some dudes, but I haven't worked customer service roles or call center jobs in a long time, you know, so I don't really know the makeup of it now, but back then, no matter where I went, call center roles, it was mostly females, mostly sitting on their hindquarters, you understand, and they was working, fielding the calls, you know. Maybe that's how the companies liked it, predominantly female workforce doing that type of work. I don't know, but regardless, you know, that's what it was. So I worked with mostly females, and for 9 months, it was cool. Till I shut this female supervisor trainer down, and then suddenly, according to her, I'm going around harassing women, and that's not what happened. I didn't do that. So I tried, I spoke up for myself, like, hey, I didn't do that, and that's when the HR hit me with the woo-wop. It was like, oh, really? Oh, well, we got all these signed signatures from these women. Look, right here, they showed me the pages. They was like, oh, we got all these signatures from all these women saying you was hitting on him. And so that's when I really got mad, because I'm like, yo, she really conspired against me. She literally created a conspiracy. And not just that, these shorties that I worked with for months, they went along with it, knowing that it didn't happen. But a lot of these, I mean, not every one of them, but listen, at least 3 of them, they were straight hood chicks. You know, you ain't got to be wearing the weed and cussing and smoking and drinking and have a bunch of babies to be a hood chick. It's just how you carry yourself and how you dress as well. You know what I'm saying? It's your demeanor and how you dress. And them chicks was hood chicks. One was older than me, and a couple was around my age, you know? So I was very offended by that. You know, I'm listening to them. I'm very angry. And I think they thought they really had me. They thought they was like, oh, yeah, we got him in the corner now. He ain't getting out of this one. We're going to fire this dude, and this a wrap. And that's going to be, the female trainer's name was Tony. They're going to be like, that's going to be Tony's revenge. Tony's revenge, she going to get him back by getting him fired. How dare he turn her down? She all that. I guess, I don't know, whatever. But that's what it was, man. That's what happened. And I'm sitting there and listening. Like I just said before, I've always been an avid comic book reader, right? So I'm sitting there listening to him, trying to think of something to say, and I remember this comic book that I had read, Superman versus Batman. Oh no, Superman and Batman. They might still got this series going on. I don't know. I haven't read it in a long time. It was real good back in the beginning. And I remember Superman had been attacked by Lex Luthor. He got attacked sick of Lex Luthor's shit, so he went up to him, Lex Luthor, and he said, I'm really glad you took this step so the whole world can see you for the evil that you really are. And that's exactly more or less what I said to HR, not the whole thing, but they was yapping, they were talking, and I looked at the HR, hand on my chin down like this, serious look, looking over I wasn't wearing glasses back then, but I looked up at him like this, and at her like this, and I was like, I'm really glad you took this step. And the whole room froze for like a second and a half. Management, the supervisor Neil, to HR, they ain't say nothing. They just couldn't understand why I would say something like that. I guess they was like, is this an admission of guilt? No, of course it wasn't no admission of guilt, because I wasn't guilty of nothing that you're accusing me of. You know what I'm saying? You know? And then they went back to talking. I was like, you know, because this is ridiculous. I had said, you know, this is ridiculous. I've been here for a minute, and I didn't do nothing like this. And they're like, well, we're going to have to let you go. You know, the textbook stuff. And I got my stuff, and they walked me out of there. But here's the thing they didn't know about me. And you would have thought that maybe they picked up on this, because look at the books I was reading. I was reading the freaking 48 Laws of Power and the 33 Strategies of War before y'all fired me. I'm not a dumb dude. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I learned something from that. Maybe I got some game. And why y'all trying to screw me? Maybe I'm somebody that has been screwed over before and actually enjoys fighting against and winning against companies that try to screw me over. And lo and behold, that's exactly who I am, who I was then and who I still am. So they didn't realize that the email that the supervisor, the trainer rather, had sent back and forth to me, they didn't realize I had printed that out weeks ago. After she had talked to me like that, they didn't realize I had printed it out, and I had saved it just for a situation like this. They didn't realize that I kind of smelled something coming, and I was just waiting patiently. They didn't realize that they thought they set the trap on me, but in fact, I was playing the long game and waiting patiently for them to drop the hammer on me, which they did. And like I said, I did win a wrongful termination lawsuit against them because of the fact that, you know, they came after me. You know, they fired me under false pretenses, under conspiracy. And the fact is, my lawyer, he was pathetic. Looking back at what I know now, we should have sued, like I said, for sexual harassment, not just for wrongful termination. We would have got a way bigger bag. But, and you know what's crazy? This is actually not the first time that company was successfully sued. They actually got sued for gender bias before as well, by a pregnant woman, you know, and she won more than I won. And it made the news, which is how I know about it. So, yeah, man, you know, I was younger. I didn't really know as well how to defend myself. Nobody really in my corner, but my lawyer and I, we still won a couple dollars, you know, in 3 months. 3 months after I got fired, right? And it's like, if I was guilty of that stuff, why did the company agree to pay out? Why did they fire the trainer not long after? Because she cost them money, and they needed to punish her. They needed to separate themselves from somebody who was responsible for what she had done, right? And that's exactly what they did. So I had to share my story of sexual harassment so y'all have an idea, you know, that, hey, y'all know this kind of thing has happened to men as well. It happens to men as well. It's terrible. Hold that thought, because I got way more to this story I'm going to talk about in this video. So, you know, I called this video Pain, Purpose, and Finally Finding Your Peace, right? I just want to bring up the fact, like, yeah, something bad happened to me. You know, I overcame it. I had the last laugh or whatever. But, you know, there's so many sayings out there. And one of my favorite sayings is you either lose or you either win or you learn, right? You never lose. You understand? And it's like winning can be a matter of your mindset, like how your perspective, how you look at things. Yeah, I won financially, but I was out of a job, right? And the money that I got should have been a lot more. You know, I spent it on whatever I spent it on, and it's gone. I wish I had spent it differently, invested in Bitcoin. I'd be straight right now, in a way different position. I had no idea Bitcoin would take off. I wasn't into investing like I'm in now, right? So the lesson for me, you know, one of the most important lessons for me was, you know, stand on your square, right? And be proud to do that. Know who you are and stand on what you believe in. Because imagine I was just one of them thirsty dudes who was like, oh, you know, she's throwing the cakes at me. I'm going to just take it just because. I don't know this woman from a hole in the wall. She might have had STDs, right? She might have had a crazy ex-husband, a crazy boyfriend. She might, who knows? She might be married right now. Nobody, I didn't know her situation. I just know that here is a woman saying, I want you, like Uncle Sam, no Diddy. You understand? And me, I'm like, I'm cool, you know? And another funny thing is, like, if I had not stood on my square and said, no, I'm not interested, I never would have got to reveal that company for her, how corrupt they actually are. Because that was conspiracy. They conspired against me like movie style. They literally put in writing, you know, all that was slander. Like, the more I think about it, I'm like, man, you know, we could have came after the women individually and not just the company. You know, they put in writing that I did something that I did not do. They tried to tarnish my character, you know. We should have sued them for a lot more than what we did. We should have sued them for at least a year's salary, at least, probably a couple years' salary, in my opinion, you know. But yeah, man, you know, it was a mistake that goes so light. I didn't know any better. But that was a long time ago. That was almost 20 years ago. What was that, 15 years ago? No, it wasn't 15 years. It was 2009. So, I met my wife in 2010, whatever, man. I don't know how long ago it was. It was a long time ago. But, yeah, you know, so it was a lesson in that situation. But I want to talk about a couple other things because, you know, it's not the first time that I faced a crazy experience from a female. You know, for me, I would say the last one was back when I lived at my previous apartment, and I don't think I talked about that. Maybe I talked about this in a different YouTube video, but I'm gonna recap it briefly because it's relevant here, maybe more just as relevant to this video, because that situation was absolutely one where I experienced pain on a level that I had not really experienced it before, and I wasn't used to experiencing it. Brief recap, you know, look, my credit wasn't that good. My wife's credit wasn't that good, but did I stay in that condition for a year, or did I do something about it? You already know the answer. I did something about it. Black Friday 2022, right? We moved in I think, March 2022, because we moved in, you know, COVID hit everybody all crazy upside the head, and we had to move from the house we were renting for like 5 years, and it was a big shift, and we had a very hard time finding a place that was compatible for all of us, you know. It just wasn't going to work. We went from a 4-bedroom house, and then the next thing I know, you know, the COVID hits, all these people are moving, landlords are selling their properties, and you know, that's why all these different renters are competing for the same properties. It was crazy out there. I didn't think we was gonna find anything. And my wife and I, we practically had to beg, like, the prospective landlord, like, for the spot. So she gave in, she gave us the spot, but I think she felt as though she could talk to us any kind of way and treat us any kind of way. But listen, way back when we used to just go over there and talk to the landlord and say, hey, we'd be a good fit because X, Y, and Z. I know our credit isn't that good, but we got the income, you know, like, you ain't got nothing on our history, you know, just you know, give us a chance. And you know, the landlord, she had 2 dogs. One was chill as heck, and the other one was just crazy vicious. And I do not like vicious dogs. I've been bit by a dog before for no reason, just walking down the street, dog jumped up at me twice. Owner was just shocked, frozen, and then walked off after throwing a sorry out real quick. Like, sorry, I got medical expenses, and here you are running away from accountability. Where have I seen that before? So, yeah, I do not like vicious dogs. And it was something about this owner. She had a real Mississippi, Louisiana feel to her. She dressed real bummy. And her parents was from down south too, you know. They came up a few times. It's just something real southern about them, which is nothing against the South. I love the South. But yeah, there's a lot of hardcore KKK racism groups and, you know, and practices in the South. And that's not opinion, that's a fact. You can look it up and see that real easy. Down in the Bible Belt, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, where Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. You understand? You know, yeah, those are dangerous places for black people, and they're also highly black concentrated areas with residents. You know, so she just had a real down south feel to her. You know, she was an accountant, and she had a house. And what's crazy about it is that the house, the apartment that we rented was on the 3rd floor. The landlord lived on the 1st floor, right? And she had told us the story once that the house we was renting, where we were all living, was former, you know, she said the owners used to have servants that, you know, had quarters there. There were no freaking servants that lived there. The owner had slaves. You need to call it for what it is. You could tell she was uncomfortable. She didn't want to be honest about it, because when she had said servants, she looked away and looked uncomfortable. It's like, okay, you bought a former slave home, you know? You could have bought something else, but I mean, I can understand why you bought this property. It's a big property, you know? I don't blame you for investing in this property. It's not about the property itself. It's about how you treat the people that you rent to while you own it. That's the only thing that matters. And this owner did not care about my feelings. She let her dog run reckless and run up to me and bark at me and snap at me. And, you know, it was an ugly situation. You know, she and I had a falling out once because I had come home from work one day, walking up the driveway with my ladder, minding my business, and here comes this dog flying out of nowhere. And I stood my ground. I turned towards the dog, my ladder, and I raised my voice at him, and I was like, back up, you know. And here the landlord literally came flying out the cut like Superman or Superwoman or whatever, and went down and covered up her dog like, you know, like bullets was about to start flying at it. That's literally how she acted. Like, forget the tenant that's paying rent. Forget the fact I'm here with my son. She didn't care about our lives, our black bodies. Her number one priority was her dog. And it's something that's very common in the white culture, is loving animals more than people, especially more than black people. And it's something that you'll see a lot in like slave movies and stuff. You know, the Django Unchained, you know, like, slave owners, you know, like to use dogs on people, you know, to keep them in line, to keep them afraid, to harm them. And also, they like to, you know, use them to bite people, to hurt people, to kill black people. This is not just movie fiction. This is American history. You know, and when you bring it up, you know, racist people are like, I didn't have nothing to do with it. I didn't do it. Well, I had somebody do something very close to that to me, you know. This woman who bought a former slave house knew this dog made me uncomfortable, saw her dog snap at me, and instead of being responsible, keeping your dog chained up or whatever, you let the dog roam the yard freely like he owns it, like he owns anything there. And then when she literally approached me about it a couple days later, like 8:30 in the morning, it was a rainy Thursday morning, and we literally almost came to blows, because I said to her, that dog will be out of here before I am. The dog will be gone before I am. And there she went again, putting the dog's life over mine. She tried to walk me down. She was like maybe 4 or 5 feet from me and tried to walk me down, having no idea. That's the funny thing about some of these people, not just white people, but just people, yo. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I could seriously hurt somebody if I wanted to. I pack a lot of punching power. We'll get into that in a few minutes, because it's one other story I want to talk about. But yeah, man, you know, I hit hard. And I don't just hit hard, I kick hard. And I got 7 years of experience. And I've trained with some very dangerous people. Not to mention I've trained with world champions, like boxing champions, like a guy who's like 9-0. I mean, I got a lot of experience, you know. I trained with a lot of people, and I'm taking some pretty hard hits. You understand? And I know multiple styles of martial arts, you know, but I also know the law. And that one time I wasn't really thinking about it, because she tried to walk me down. So, you know, I went to defend myself. My wife got between the two of us, separated us. You know, she made out pretty lucky, you know, but yeah, I would have definitely folded her. She didn't realize that, but all this was over a dog. And that's the story. But what's the purpose of me telling this story? Because we're already at 29 minutes, right? Just trying to keep this short. The purpose of the story is very simple. You know, my wife and I, obviously we had to move out of there, right? We had just moved in March, and here that day that incident happened, the landlord was like, I want y'all to move out of here tomorrow. And I stopped her right there. I was like, you can't legally have us, you can't evict us and tomorrow, you can't do that. You know, I was like, that's illegal, you know that, right? And like I said, my wife was there at the time all this happened, thank God, right? And so that's when the landlord changed. She was like, well, I want y'all to leave by the end of the lease. I'm not gonna renew the lease, right? So that was her way of saying, my dog will always be more important than you. I'll show you. Just like, you know, the trainer Tony was like, oh, he wants to reject me. I'll just have all these women sign paperwork saying that DG tried to say, I harassed them, you know, and I didn't. I won that case as well. So what did I do? What did I do in the remaining months I was there? What did I make of my time? How did I find peace? Because that's what the ultimate goal is in life. And also the point of this video is about finding peace, right? Finding peace, finding purpose in your pain and finding peace, right? So, you know, my wife and I were living there, and it was stressful at first, you know, for like a month or two, you know, knowing what had happened, trying to avoid the landlord. But lucky me, I was working on a book at the time, right? And knowing that I had to get my family out of there in like less than a year, I had to improve my credit to the point where we could get approved for a new place. And, you know, I had to finish this book I had been working on for a year and a half at that point, right? It gave me a purpose. It gave me a purpose, and it's nothing short of amazing that I did finish my book while I was working there. While I was living there. I finished my book, had it sent to the proofreading stages, did the cover design, you know, got it published while I was, got it published right before we moved out. Yeah, right before like 5 days before we moved out, I got it published, right? And what happened? You know, as you guys know, the word Zen means peace. And it's nothing short of amazing that was the name my wife and I decided on for our toddler. He's a toddler now. My little boy, Zen. Right? You know, I was able to find peace from the situation that was going on by focusing all my energy and all my effort into, you know, getting us out of that situation. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna publish this book and sell a bunch of copies in the next 10 months. Like, is it possible? Probably, but I don't have the resources and knowledge. I didn't have the resources and knowledge to do that at that time. But you know, the industry I work in, you know, I make really good money, and I was able to use 1 week's worth of check to get the funds to move. So that's pretty awesome, you know. But yeah, you know, I was able to find purpose despite the pain I was going through. That wasn't the only pain I was experiencing, but you know, it's weird because I worked harder on, you know, that project in that year than maybe, you know, I've worked in a long time. You know, I also worked on improving my credit, you know, for my wife and I. Black Friday 2022, Black Friday, I bought a course from Mr. Phenomenal Power, Dion Coopwood. And I learned about the credit system. You know, I learned how, you know, the credit system in America actually goes from 300 to 850. You know, and I took the necessary steps to get certain things off my credit. For the first time in my life, you know, I was able to get my credit up into the 700s. This is how my wife and I was able to get approved for where we live now, right? I was able to help my wife get her score higher than it's ever been, and in a matter of months, she went from like low 600s into like the mid 750s, and she got it all the way up to 777. That's the highest it's ever been. My baby was on the way to the 800 club, you know, and she's actually going to get back there, you know. I'm gonna help her with that as well. So, you know, again, in life, like when something bad happens to you, I'm not gonna say the only thing you should do is try to find, you know, a purpose for your pain, because some things are just wrong, like the story I'm gonna tell you next, right? And there's no getting around it, there's no excuse. But if you have time, like I did, you know, with the situation where I used to live, you know, take that time, apply your anger, apply your, you know, energy in a productive manner. That's what I did, and now I have a book product that I'm proud of that's still selling copies today. I still receive the payouts, from that every couple months. And, just use it to live a better life. I'm very happy. I have my son now, a toddler, and that's how I was able to find peace despite my situation. So let me give you all this last story. This one is different. This one is a different story. I haven't really shared this in depth, but there was something that happened earlier this year. And it still bothers me. It doesn't bother me nearly as much as it used to. It really used to eat at me. Because usually, like, when something bad happens, I'm able to, like, get the upper hand, get the person punished who did wrong. And this was a situation where I wasn't really able to do that. Public adjuster, I went to a claim. I didn't really want to be there. I was tired. I was running behind. I was not able to log into my system and call him to get his phone number to call him to let him know, like, hey, I was running behind, but I just couldn't find a password for it. So I just got there, maybe like 30 minutes late, but he wasn't even necessarily ready to do the work at the time. When I got there, he wasn't ready to go inside the house. He was still outside the house, supervising the person who was outside the house doing the exterior inspection. Typically, I do both as an insurance adjuster, but in that case, the insurance company had to send Hancock to get on the roof, so whatever. He was outside managing Hancock, who got on the roof, and I don't know why Hancock was taking so long. If the appointment was at 9 o'clock, it doesn't take 30 minutes to inspect a roof, but, whatever. They got there when they got there, and they're doing their thing. So I went to go inside with the public adjuster. He's like, no, you can leave. You can get out of here. I'm going to have the guy on the roof to the inside. And number one, he didn't have the authority because he wasn't paying the guy to do the inside. The insurance company dictates who does what. That's why I was contracted to be there, right? And that's why Hancock was contracted to be there for the roof only. Public adjuster didn't have the authority to tell Hancock to get on the roof, or rather get from the roof on the inside. But he said that because he wanted to antagonize me. I guess he was angry that I was late. It's like, bro, you didn't call me either. You didn't call me to see if I was coming or if I was all right. If I was in a car accident, you just spazzed on me, And you're like, oh, that's not spazzing, telling you to leave. Listen, So he's like, you can leave. I was like, well, I got the inside to do. He's like, no, I'm going to have the guy on the roof do the inside. You can get out of here. So I turned around and walk away. And I'm ticked off. I drove all the way 40 minutes to get there. I'm tired. I don't want to be there. I don't necessarily need the claim, right? And here you are, like, treating me like trash after 10 years of doing this, disrespecting me. I'm saying, not respecting me as a professional, not respecting my time. So I'm walking away. And I said to the guy, well, at least I still get paid to be here. Now, it's not about whether I got paid to be here. It's not even about whether I needed to say that. Of course I didn't need to say it. Yes, it was antagonistic, but the point is the guy started it. I'm not going to let somebody just disrespect me and walk away. Could I have? Sure. But it didn't feel right doing that. And that situation blew up because I'm still walking away to my car. The guy shouts behind me like, you're a real piece of S, right? I turned around and looked at him. I was like, don't talk to me like that. And here he come marching across the lawn, like some cartoon character. Dead straight up like a Tom and Jerry cartoon character. Chest puffs forward, leaning forward, fist behind him, butt behind him. Like, bruh, if you lean any farther, you're going to fall forward on your face, on your chin. At 50 some years old, or however you are with gray hair, you should know this. But I guess he never learned to fight, so he got within like a dangerous enough distance. I held my hand up to him. I was like, don't touch me. And he stopped in his tracks, maybe like, 3 feet from me. And he said, what did he say? He was like, oh, I'd love to knock you out, but I'm on the job. So I'm looking at him, I'm confused. I'm just looking to see what he's going to do next, because if you're going to walk me down, then I have to watch myself. I got to watch my surroundings to make sure, like, you don't try to sneak me or attack me. Because you already made it clear that you're trying to attack me, right? So I'm just looking at him to see what he does next. He raises his fist towards the sky. And I say the sky because, like, you would think, like, he would raise it towards my face, but he didn't really realize that that's not how you throw a punch, bro. You're literally trying to intimidate me, and you're doing a really bad job of it, because that's not how you hit somebody. Like, if you're going to take off and fly into the sky, obviously nobody can do that, but then that's how you would do that. You would, that's what Superman does, right? But yeah, man, his elbow was pointed towards the ground. I'm just like, obviously it caught me off guard. I'm still tired. My inner adrenaline's rushing because this guy just tried to walk me down. Like, I'm on high alert. I got stuff on my hands, you know what I'm saying? And I don't want to put my stuff down because then I got to pick it up and risk getting kicked in the face. So I got stuff on my hands. I'm just looking to see what he does next, you know what I'm saying? And it's funny because, like, this guy's marching across the yard, not realizing, like, I'm watching him march across the yard. I had something in my hands, like, bruh, I literally want to take what I got in my hands and cut you wide open. And I probably could have, because a part of it was broken. A part of it was broken and jagged. Like, I wanted to do that, but it's like, if I do that, then I get charged with assault and excessive force, right? When the police can be like, you should have just walked away. You used a deadly weapon. You got to go to jail forever, you know? So, attempted murder, right? But it's like, you guys are just going to excuse what he did. So here I was trying to calmly handle the situation, knowing the experience I got, knowing these different ways that I could hurt this guy, with or without what was in my hand. And the guy escalates it by raising a fist to me. You're like not being a professional whatsoever. Just absolutely trying to start a fight. Trying to escalate it, trying to see what you can get away with. And that was the thing that really pushed me over the edge. So I jumped backwards, you know, pissed off. And that's when I really woke up, you know. I was like, all right, this is not a game anymore. I tried to walk away. This guy walked me down. Now he raised his fist to me. And I had thought about, you know, like I've said before, throwing a fist into his face as I retreated. But what would that have led to? That would have led to an actual fight. And I could have, and I was justified in it. You know, there's many things I could do off of throwing a fist, you know, into your face as I retreat. I'm not going to say what they are here because I don't know who's watching. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, there's many things I could have done. But you know, I was at this point, like when I stepped back like about 2 or 3 steps, I jumped back like 2 or 3 steps. You know, at that point I woke up. You know, like I'm actually ready at this time to defend myself, to do something. And for whatever reason, this guy looks at me, turns around and walks away. Maybe he felt like, oh, I showed him. He backed off. Huh, this is my scene. This is my territory. I don't know what he was thinking. He's just a crazy old man. Working for Metro Public Adjustment, right? And of course, I called the police. I made a police report. And, you know, I really thought that the police were going to, like, arrest him for assault because that's what it was. You look it up on ChatGPT. Even if you do something like that and there's no contact, it's still defined as civil assault, right? But the police decided to just gather the facts, and, you know, they had me leave after they talked to both of us, and they had him leave eventually, right? I don't think the police handled it right, and I definitely have an option left, but I haven't decided to exercise it just yet, right? I have at least 2 options left, right, on what I could do regarding that situation, you know. And, you know, I haven't really, only thing that's really helped me find peace since that happened, you know, was like just time. You know, I didn't really talk to a lot of people about it. I didn't tell my wife about it for 3 weeks after it happened. I mentioned it to a couple people on Facebook. I talked to my barber about it, a hair barber, you know, and pretty much people's general response was like, hey, you know, I'm sorry that happened. Just, you know, the guy must have been having a bad day. Not to make an excuse for him, but just don't let it consume you. You know, just keep in mind, like, you obviously could look at this guy with what he did and see that he couldn't fight no matter how angry he was. You know, that seeing red stuff doesn't really work. Because I'm actually a trained fighter. I recently returned to my school that I was at for about 4.5 years. At that school, I studied Muay Thai and boxing. And since I've returned, I've been studying a little bit of Jiu-Jitsu, and I've returned to Muay Thai as well. And before that, you know, I studied Judo, Modern Arnis, Iaido, and multiple other styles, you know, Aikido, Karate, a lot of stuff. You know, I trained with throwing stars, swords, wooden swords, a lot of weapons, you know. I've even took a couple gun disarm classes. So I've been training in martial arts for a couple years. I'm not some slouch. Definitely not a weak guy. But I'm also a criminal justice graduate. You know, so ironically, the school I graduated from, you know, they are permanently closed. So I'm trying to get my student loans forgiven for them. University of Phoenix, I'm looking at you, which is scam itself. But yeah, man. Hold on one second, y'all. I gotta let these people. drove by who was not at all paying attention. Just walked across the street. I guess they felt like they had the right of way. Maybe they did. But anyways, I haven't really found peace with that situation. Aside from the fact that so much time has went by, that the experience really only bothers me in waves. I just try to find peace in spending time with my family, the vacations that we go on, and just life keeping me busy. Because I brought it up to I reported to the police. The police were like, man, we'll take a report. I feel as though if it was the other way around, they absolutely would have arrested me. There was a witness there. Oh man, the guy on the roof. And, he just apparently told the police that he didn't see anything, even though he was present for all of it, so I guess he just didn't want to be involved. But yeah, man, that situation definitely sucked. I reported him to his employer. I reported him to my employer, the insurance company, Department of Insurance, and nothing really came of it, besides his employer cutting on him and said, "Ooh, you're really in a big trouble." But, he kept his job. And, it definitely bothered me, for a long time. And this is one of those situations where I just had to find peace regardless of the outcome, right? Because with the previous situations, I found peace because of the outcome. In this case, I had to find peace despite the outcome. I'm gonna wrap up with this story. I was at my class, my school, a week or two ago. Because like I said, I recently returned to my school for a 6-week membership. And I've learned it's extremely difficult to be a new parent, be a husband, be a full-time business owner, and be a martial arts student as well. It's just extremely difficult. It's really not possible. There's just really not enough time in the day. Hold that thought. I'll be right back. All right, so let's wrap this up, right? I forget exactly where I left off, but I recently returned to my school, like I said. I took some time off because, we moved and, we had our toddler and, it's just really no time to be going to martial arts schools like that. When you have a new baby, if you're a responsible parent and husband, you gotta be home to play your part, every hour counts. And, we have a teenager in high school, so, and I have a business I run, so there's a lot of responsibility, still is a lot of responsibility. When I'm able to sneak away, it's cool, but it's difficult, very difficult, not to mention the lack of sleep, compounded with working harder, than I was before. I used to get a lack of sleep. As a new parent, it's a lot of work, and I'm older now than I used to be, so I don't recover as quickly as I used to. But, I'll wrap up with this story. I was in class 2 weeks ago at my old school, and just a regular day. I was happy to be there. My membership is actually good through the end of this month, and I've been trying to get back to class since, what was the last time I was there? I think last week. I haven't even worn my gi yet because I can take the BJJ program as well, and I haven't even taken my gi out of the plastic yet because I just, life is so busy. I don't even have time to attend the BJJ classes like I want to. So I paid $199. I've only attended a few classes, and I wanted to go to sparring last night and class Monday, but I've been sick for a couple of days, so I could not attend. I couldn't go because of my health, and I couldn't go because I didn't want to make anybody sick, so I'm just looking forward to getting better so I can get back to school. But I was in class like a week or two ago, and one of the guys, the first guy I was training with, you could tell he was new. He didn't really have a lot of experience. We were doing these touch and return drills. So, the pad holder, the guy holding the pad, he touches you on your shoulder, and as soon as you get touched on the shoulder, you return fire with with a combo, you know what I'm saying? So you do maybe jab, hook, kick, something like that. Or like a 5-piece combo, something like that. And I'm not gonna lie to you, these were the newer pads. They were really thick and tough, and I wanted my punches to like land and make an impact, so I was throwing with a lot of power. I wasn't just throwing with a lot of power because of how thick they were. I was throwing with a lot of power because I was still angry about what happened to me earlier this year. And I'm out there, there was a couple fighters, that used to go to our school. I know one of them still does. I don't know about the other one. He used to be the boxing coach. Izzy, good dude. Izzy, Coach Israel. But he was the person that made me realize how dangerous shorter fighters can actually be. They used to call him Izzy the Tasmanian Devil. Izzy is a good dude. And everybody like Izzy. You know what I'm saying? But Izzy is a terrifying fighter. He is scary. Izzy does not care. He doesn't fear nothing. I've seen his fights, fighting, competing, and that guy is incredible. Is this one fight I seen, it was like something out of the Raid Redemption. It was, yeah, man. That guy can fight. Don't ever be fooled by somebody's height or whatever. Either you can fight or you can. So, yeah, shout out to Coach Izzy. Much love. And Paul the Wall, Coach Izzy and Paul the Wall, they used to go at it in sparring. People would jump out of their way when they actually were sparring because they would be moving so fast. It'd be like a Dragon Ball Z scene. No cap. I was there. I've seen it happen. And I've heard stories about it as well. Those guys can really fight. But Paul's more chill. He's more reserved. Where Izzy is more relaxed. And just, he'll call you out. You're talking crazy. He'll be like, throw on some gloves and come out and be in the middle of the floor. Paul's way more chill and relaxed. But once those gloves go on, you start sparring, his whole attitude changes. So I was out there kind of channeling Paul the Wall. That's what we used to call him, Paul the Wall, because he also competed a lot. He won a lot. Paul's another very good fighter. But Paul, unlike Izzy, Paul did not hit with as much power. Paul could hit with a lot of power. But, I've actually had my head snapped back before by Paul a couple times, But I didn't really fear Paul as much as Izzy because Izzy was just down for whatever, anytime, But Paul was more chill. He showed a more reserved side. So I didn't have to fear Paul as much. But I'm out there throwing these punches on the pad, really throwing. Not because this is a new person. I'm I'll show you how strong I am. I'm throwing because I'm mad. It's a chance for me to express my energy. I've been holding it in however long, right? I'm finally back at my school. Time away from being a parent, work. Let me let it go. And at some point during the punching, my classmate says to me, dang, man, he's like, do you hate being touched on that shoulder or something? He's like, are you angry? Are you mad about something? I was like, I don't hate being touched on the shoulder, but yeah, I am mad about something. I'm just, just throwing punches. And I didn't do it to intimidate the dude or nothing. We were training, I'm out there training, just throwing, throwing bombs because I could. And I've learned over time that just because somebody's big and muscular doesn't mean that they can hit hard. It's really about the technique and the skill experience you have, not just necessarily the muscle mass, I myself, I've learned to kick with a lot of power and punch with a lot of power, even though I'm not a big guy, just based on the years of experience I have, and how I throw kicks or punches, And then I remember a couple guys later, the same day, I was training with someone else, and I had never met this guy as well before. And we didn't even really start yet. He just came out the gate, just dropping compliments, talking about, hey man, you look like you can fight. And I've never had anybody say that to me ever in my life, so it really caught me off guard because I was like, I literally just came here to train. I'm not looking for compliments. I don't know most of you people. Most of you I've never seen before because I haven't been here in over 5 years. We're all students, and it really caught me off guard. So, I'm trying to tell him to be cool. And he's like, no, man, I seen you throwing them kicks and punches. He's like, you got a martial artist physiques too. So then I'm starting to look at him kind of funny. I'm like, yo, you got this porn mustache, you know, and kind of fat. I'm like, yo, is he on some Diddy stuff? Like, is this guy on the fruity side? Because I'm not with that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gay. And I'm married. So what are you doing? Because, you know, I didn't know what he was up to. I just tried to play it off. I told him, like, look, man, you know, what matters most is how I do with sparring. You know, it's like, you know, let's not blow my head up too much, you know. And the thing is, like, of course I'm going to look like I'm that good to somebody who doesn't have as much experience as me. You know what I'm saying? That's the other thing. Like, if you don't have as much experience as I have, of course I'm going to look really good. But, you know, like I came home, I told my wife about that story. I was like, it would be different if somebody who I had trained with for all those years was like, yo, you've come a long way, man. You're looking really sharp out here. And they had trained with me from the beginning, or near the beginning, and they seen how far we've sparred together. It'd be different if it was Coach Paul the Wall. Well, Paul wasn't a coach, but it would be different if it was Paul the Wall, right? Or Coach Izzy. And he was like, yo, man, you looking good out here. You look like you can fight. Then I would respect it a lot more, because it's somebody with more experience than me, or near my level of experience, you know, and they're actually giving me props, you know what I'm saying? But to wrap all this up, you know, I've learned that finding peace, you know, is something, it's an internal journey. You know, it's not just, oh, I named my sons and look at me, I'm so cool. No, it's more to it than that. Like, finding peace, finding purpose in your pain, and finding peace at the end of it, it's a personal journey. You know, you gotta, this is the part of the journey you do alone. I'm actually going to do a video on that topic, so stand by for that one. But you know, finding peace is a personal experience. It's something that you do on your own. You have to, you know. And I had to realize that situation that happened to me back in March. You know, I handled it the best that I could, as smart as I could, to keep my license, because my license is something I'm proud of, and I can't let one incident cause me to lose myself and lose my license and my means of providing for my family. You know, I stood my ground. You know, I got out of range from an attack. You know, I spoke up for myself. I have to be happy with those things and understand, like, you can't crush everybody. You can't necessarily win every time in every way you want to against everybody. You just have to be okay with, you know, doing your best. And you gotta find peace in life despite it, you know, despite the outcome. Win or lose, you gotta be okay with what happened. Bernard Hopkins, right? You know, his last fight, he didn't win. I think he got knocked out of the ring. My wife met him at her job. She used to work there. I think she got a picture with him, which is pretty cool. But Bernard Hopkins, he was known as the Executioner, killer boxer, still widely respected. He didn't win his last fight and then he retired. Does losing your last fight change your boxing skill? Does it, you know, does getting knocked out of the ring mean that you can't fight? No, it doesn't mean that at all, you know? Bernard Hopkins knows who he is, and he had to make peace with that situation and keep going through his life despite the outcome of that fight. You know, so that's something I've learned in life. Like, you gotta be okay. You gotta find a way to be okay with what happens to you, despite how it made you feel or how it made you look. And that's my lesson for today, y'all. You know, just you know, find a purpose for your pain. Make the most of your time. You know, if you're going through a bad situation, use it for self-advancement, and ultimately seek to find peace, because you live longer and happier that way. That's it for today. Peace.